X4CTO and Mrs. Pumpkins. Hello everyone out there at YouTube. Knife Thursday, CGC Showdown, Cut, Gut, and Carve. This is my VR submission for X4CTO. Want me to scare his lady? I'm going to be doing that here in a second. Right now, here's the jack-o'-lantern that I worked on for everybody. Do it with my little Gerber ripstop here. Nice small blade, good for getting in all the little grooves and crevices and such. It's actually my carry for when I wear a suit or a tuxedo or something dressy, because it's low profile and can fit my breast pocket really nicely. Try to never be without an edge of some kind. Got a story to tell you. Let me switch things up here. Hoping you can see me. I didn't adjust this any. I'm going to refer to some notes a couple times probably, because I really don't want to leave anything else, because this is a pretty big deal. Story I'm about to tell you is absolutely true. Surrounding events that occurred, I believe, in 1976 in early September. Relayed to me by my sister, because my sister happened to be there during this occurrence. My family's always believed in the spirit world in one form or another. We've always kind of embraced the things that go bump in the night, and maybe that's why things turned out the way they did on this night. Maybe not. I don't really know. I guess it doesn't ultimately matter. There's an old abandoned 3-story Victorian home located in a big field between the small Texas towns of Harlingen and San Benito. It's been there a very, very long time. There'd always been stories like there are of old homes in the middle of big fields of it being haunted. Ironically, the local JCs and Chambers of Commerce had their Halloween haunted houses there for several years, without any instance of any kind of disaster other than once. It seems that a guy in his 30s, when he was doing a mock hanging for the horror show, his harness broke and he actually broke his neck in front of about 30 people and died. It's kind of an old deal. A lot of people talk about it back in San Benito and Harlingen from a really, really long time ago. But I digress. My sister, my mother, and 3 close friends thought it'd be a good idea to drive out to this place late one night and explore and kind of see what would go on. It was a very hot night, early September. South Texas nights are always steamy as hell during that time. Just kind of the way it is. The air was so thick in the house that they could barely breathe. Just an old musty house, hot Texas night. You get the deal. The place was too dark to get around in, so they sat down in a parlor, or what they figured was the parlor, to wait for the light to adjust. Eventually your eyes adjust to the dark. Normally it only takes a few minutes to adjust to available light, but for some reason it just wasn't happening. Actually, according to them, the place got even darker while they were sitting there, which really kind of spooked them out. Out of angst, they all got together and surrounded a Zippo lighter and sat there and just kind of waited for things to happen. Sat there for a while, then they all felt it at the same time. A rush of ice cold ran through the room. They all looked at each other in complete disbelief. Suddenly, my mother yanked up to her feet as though she was pulled up by a rope, like something pulled her up, muttered something under her breath, and sprinted out the door of the room into a hallway as though she could see plain as day in the pitch black. Or maybe she knew how to get around in the house. I don't really know. They were scared to death and started yelling for her and tried to chase her, but it was too dark. They couldn't see anything, and they kept running into things and, eventually lost her. A few minutes later, they could hear footsteps running around in the floor above them. So after groping around in the dark for a while, they found a stairway to get up to the second floor. They got up to the second floor and started hearing this wailing that was coming from either higher up in the house. Just crazy wailing sound. Freaked them all out, and they started, of course, crashing around still in the dark. Found the other stairwell that went up to the 3rd floor. After stumbling around for a while going towards the sound, they came to a room in the back of the house on the top floor. Opened the door, and there was my mother standing in a tall, slim window on the sill at the very back of the house, with her back to them, wailing like a banshee. All at once, they all went and grabbed her and pulled her to the ground, afraid that she was going to run and try to jump, because pretty much when they got to her, she was on her way out the window. They were sure of it. She was leaping out into the black and was going to kill herself. They all held her to the ground. After a moment, she opened her eyes and looked around in disbelief and confusion, and then just started screaming bloody murder and thrashing. All they could do was hold her down for a little while. She calmed down, and eventually they started questioning her about what had happened. And the thing is she couldn't remember a single thing that happened from when she walked in the door of the house. No occurrences inside the house were in her memory at all. What she did remember was what was frightening. She was in a place as dark as pitch. There was no sound. She could see nothing, but the smell of death was everywhere. It's just rotting meat, just a horrible, horrible stench. She could feel the things that were there clawing at her skin and biting her and trying to pull her to the ground. She tried to scream and no sound would come out. She could feel herself screaming, but there was no sound. She felt like she was there for an eternity. She thought for sure she was going to go mad. And then just as quickly as she had appeared there, she was on the floor of the house with all her friends holding her down, and all she could do was scream bloody murder because she was so afraid. They scooped her up and got her out of the house as fast as they could. No one spoke on the drive all the way back into town. They didn't speak for a while after that either. My sister decided to research the goings-on in the house as far back as she could, and back then it was on microfiche in the library, so you had to run through newspapers. It seems in the 40s that there was a couple that lived there, farming the land, living in the home, man and a wife. He apparently left her for someone else, and over the following year, she slipped into deep depression and complete madness, and eventually it got the best of her, and she committed suicide by jumping out of the tall, slim window at the back end of the house, which is the same window that they pulled my mother from. She jumped out of that window and impaled herself on an iron fence and died. Mom never talked about this after it happened. Only my sister told me everything that went down. My mom was never the same after this. She had a deep melancholy that followed her around wherever she went. She hardly ever slept. She never smiled. I know that, it really tore her up, the things that happened there, and it left something with her. I don't really know, I can't really wrap my brain around it too well. The home no longer stands. It was torn down years ago, and my mom's no longer with us. But I know she took the horror of that night with her to the grave. And, she spent this horrible time there in this dark, dark place of ripping claws, gnashing teeth, and silent screams.